Hello everybody, welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make seeded rye bread. This is going to make 2 loaves, and it's a recipe which I saw Anna Olsen make, and the recipe can also be found on foodnetwork.com. I'm varying it slightly, this recipe, because the actual recipe uses some soaked wheat berries, which I'm not going to use. I'm simply going to use pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds and flax seeds. So the recipe takes a while to make because you have to prepare some of the rye flour as a starter first and leave that for 14 hours at least for it to activate, and then the next day you can go on to make the loaves. So I'll deal with the starter first, and for the ingredients I have 300 grams of rye flour, which is 2.5 cups. I have 310 millilitres of lukewarm water, that's 1.25 cups. Then I have a teaspoon of instant yeast, and I'm going to use with that a teaspoon of honey. I have half a teaspoon of ground cardamom and a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Again, in the Anna Olsen recipe, she uses a mixed levain instead of the yeast and the honey, but I don't have that and I didn't want to make it. So what I'm going to do to start off with is to put the the pepper, the cardamom and the yeast into the rye flour, and I'm going to stir that around so that does get reasonably well mixed into the flour. And then I'm simply going to squeeze about a teaspoon of honey into my lukewarm water, and I'll whisk that around. And I'm going to pour that into the flour, and then I'm going to mix it until it comes together in a sort of sticky mass. So I'm going to scrape the mixture off the side of the bowl. I'm just going to turn it over to make sure that I've got all the flour incorporated. That's good enough like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sprinkle some rye flour over that, and then I'm going to cover it with some plastic wrap and leave it at room temperature for at least 14 hours. And I'm just going to sift some flour over it. This is to stop it from forming a skin. So I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap and I'll leave it for 14 hours. Then I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step, and that involves soaking some day-old cubes of bread in water as one thing, and that will eventually get added into the dough, and then mixing this starter in with the other ingredients to form our 2 loaves. So I'll be back once this is activated. It's the next day now, and our rye flour starter has been sitting there activating a little bit for about 24 hours actually. So now we're going to go on to make the seeded rye loaf, and I'll tell you the ingredients. There's quite a few of them. I have my rye starter, which we did yesterday, and then I have 180 grams more of rye flour. That works out at 1.5 cups. I have 750 grams of bread flour, which is 5 cups. I have 2.25 teaspoons, 8 grams of instant yeast. I have a tablespoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of molasses, half a cup of instant coffee, which is cooling down to room temperature, 150 grams, 1 cup of pumpkin seeds, 150 grams, 1 cup of sunflower seeds, 40 grams, 1/4 cup of flax seeds, and here I have 140 grams of day-old or 2-day-old bread, which I have soaked in boiling water. We're going to squeeze the water out, and then we're going to use a little bit of that water as well. Then I have 1 egg mixed with 2 tablespoons of water for an egg wash later, so we don't need that. So I'll just move a few things aside to make room for the stand mixer, and then we can get to work. So the first thing to do is to put our rye starter into the bowl of the stand mixer. And then I'm going to put in our soaked bread, but I'm going to squeeze that out . And then I'm going to put the flours in, but I'm going to mix the yeast into the bread flour a little bit. And I'll mix the salt into the rye flour a little bit. I'm going to give that a bit of a mix around on the very low speed. And then I'm going to add in the molasses and the coffee. And I'm going to add about a third of a cup, I may need a little bit more but I don't think so, of the water from the soaked bread, and I'm going to mix this for about 5 minutes on low speed. And that's very, very sticky, as you can see, but I've mixed that for about 5 minutes. I'm just going to pull that down, and then I'm going to add my 3 types of seed in, and I'm going to mix it for about another 10 minutes, again on a low speed. So that's 10 minutes on low speed to get these incorporated. And with that mixed like that for about 10 minutes, as you can see, it's very, very sticky, and it needs to rest now for 30 minutes before we shape it, and then it will prove again for an hour in the loaf tins that we're going to use. Now you could let this rest in this bowl, but I'm going to transfer it to another bowl just for ease. So I have the dough in this bowl, and I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap and leave it for 30 minutes. Then I'll come back and we'll go on to shape the loaves. The dough has proved now for 35 minutes in fact, and so I'm ready to divide it and shape it into 2 loaves. So for that I have greased two 2-pound loaf tins at 9 inches by 5 inches, and I'm going to flour the work surface and tip this dough out onto it. It's very sticky, so you need the flour. Just going to scrape the excess out of the bowl. Okay. So I'm going to put some flour over the top as well and press it down. And then I'm going to divide it into 2. And set one piece aside. And then with this piece, I'm going to flatten it out. And then I'm going to roll it up like that. And drop it into the tin. And do the same with the second piece, like that. And then I'm going to cover those with a clean tea towel, and I'm going to leave them to rise for 1 hour. As the hour is coming to an end, I will preheat my oven to 180 Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and then we'll be ready to bake them. So I'll come back in an hour and we'll egg wash them, and then we'll sprinkle a few extra seeds on the top, cut down the centre, and then we'll bake them. So it's been an hour and the dough has been rising in the loaf tins, and so now what I'm going to do is take my beaten egg and water, and I'm going to brush it over the top. And then I'm going to take just a few seeds of the sunflower seeds, the pumpkin and the flax seeds. Doesn't have to be many, just a few, and sprinkle them over as well. And then the final thing to do before they go into the preheated oven is to take a serrated knife and cut down the centre, like that. And then I'm going to put them into the oven, and I'm going to bake them for an hour until the top has got a nice brown colour, and I would test the temperature to make sure that it has reached about 200 Fahrenheit, 94 Celsius, and if it has, I'd also test with a skewer. Then I'll take them out and tip them out straight away and put them onto a wire rack to cool down, and when they've cooled down I'll come back and show you the results. The rye bread is still slightly warm, but it's sort of rested and it's almost cooled down. So what I've done is I've cut into it, and this is what it looks like. And it certainly smells very good. So I'm going to break this slice open and have a taste. it really does have a very, very nice flavour. Has a rich flavour to it, and it's quite a heavy loaf, as it would be with rye bread, because rye doesn't have the gluten in it. But you get the crunch of the seeds as you're chewing, as well as that lovely rich flavour. So I'm going to enjoy eating this. Perfect for sandwiches and such like. I hope you've enjoyed this recipe, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, which will take you to a link for this recipe, and I'll also put a link below the video for it as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future, so until then, happy baking.